Welcome to all viewers. Choe Khor Sum Ling is happy to have all of you at an open heart conversation with Kabir Saxena ji. Kabir Saxena ji is the backbone, the support, the guide to all FPM centers in India. He is a teacher. For those of you who are really new, Choe Khor Sum Ling is a center of FPMT Incorporated in Bangalore. FPMT Incorporated is a global Buddhist organization started by Kyabje Lama Yeshe and Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. FPMT is the acronym for the Foundation for the Preservation of Mahayana Tradition. It refers to this internationally affiliated network of centers, projects, and services that are aimed to teaching Buddha Dharma and Buddhist education. And we call ourselves the FPMT organization. In India, we have 9 centers across Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, New Delhi, and Karnataka. And our esteemed guest is directly involved with all of us in one way or the other. In some places, he's on the board of trustees. Some places he has helped form from its inception. Kabir Saxena ji travels between New Delhi, Bodh Gaya, Uttar Pradesh, Dharamshala, with the aim of helping all these Buddhist centers become self-sufficient and continuously reach out to people who are interested in studying Buddhism. He was the director of Root Institute for Wisdom Culture in Bodh Gaya for many years. After his studies at the Oxford University in England, Kabir ji ordained as a monk. And right now, Kabir ji teaches meditation and Buddhist studies to students everywhere, but extensively in New Delhi, in Himachal Pradesh, in Bir, and in Nepal. We are so happy to have you with us, Kabir ji, and thank you for accepting this invite to come and spend this afternoon with us in an open heart conversation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dee. I won't call you DG. In fact, you don't need to call me Kabir Saxena Ji. He's around. And hi, Shanti. So yes, thank you so much. I'm very humbled. Yeah, I'm following on from Venerable Rabina and Jetsunma, and yeah, that's it's not an act one can follow, although I understand it's somewhat different. You said I was the backbone. I'm not the backbone. I'm just one of the many pillars that have helped get the centers going in India, and I certainly wasn't one of the first. There were many other pillars and people who have been helping and are helping now. I just helped start a few things off. So yeah, please don't think that I'm a kind of the backbone or anything like that. That would give the wrong impression. And I'm not just trying to be humble. It's the fact. We should stick to the facts as much as we can, although facts are in the eyes of the perceiver, I guess. Yeah. So
one other fact is that you spent a lot of time with Kyabje Lama Yeshe very early on when he spent time in India.
A little bit, yes.
A lot of us don't know about Lama Yeshe except from the stories that have come in the FPMT website, or the stories told by Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche or some of our teachers, or of course the Lama Yeshe Wisdom work, incredible work. They've just released a book called Big Love, which is the biography of Kyabje Lama Yeshe. What are some of the stories that you can tell us about him? We've heard that he used to include everyone who would pass his path into his sort of mandala. What was he like, and how did he visualize, centers in India?
Okay, so I'll tell you one story and then answer your second question. Of course, there are so many stories, and he was somebody larger than life. So let me start with a story, which is me and my dad walking up the hill in Dharamshala to meet Lama, yeah, because I was a Buddhist and dad, maybe had some mixed. Dad was also a big smoker, so it took him ages to walk up the hill to Shiva Center. So we get to the top, we wait a little while, and then the director, I can't remember who it was, maybe Tupangelik, not sure. Anyway, we went in onto the roof of what is now Rinpoche's house, so-called, and Lama was there. And first thing Lama does is get some delicious, dutsi, alcohol, and puts it into my dad's palm, And Dad, like, and says, taste it. And, Dad tasted, I think from that moment, the explosion of some kind of happiness or bliss in Dad's mind. And he kind of, he must have felt, I really like this guy. And then the first thing Lama says to him, are you satisfied with your son? Knowing that my dad had some mixed feelings maybe about me being a, Buddhist, spending all my time doing that rather than getting married and having kids. You see, Lama knew people inside out. He knew people's minds, and he was incredibly kind and warm-hearted and all-embracing. So there he was. In the first few seconds, he got right into my dad's heart, with what he did, and I can't remember the rest of the conversation. It wasn't very long, but that really touched my dad, to have Lama give him, because Dad was a bit of a tippler. He had his chota pegs in the evening. He liked his alcohol. So Lama gave him some really blessed alcohol, and yeah. So my father always loved Lama. Then I remember, let me tell one other story, and just to, give the big-heartedness of that extraordinary man. I was doing a short retreat at Tushita Center in Delhi, believe it or not, at a time when Venerable Roger was there as a very thin young monk. Roger had been an electrician, and so he sorted some things out in my retreat room at the back of Tushita, which used to be in another part of Delhi. And Lama was, I was on the roof one day in a break, and I saw Lama on the lawn playing with the dogs, right? He loved those Tibetan dogs, yeah? So there he was playing, and, really as though he were a child playing with the dogs. Then he looked up and saw me, and because I was supposed to, and he said hello, and very stupidly, of course, though I was supposed to be in silence, I kind of put my finger to my lips. And of course, later I felt terrible, How dare you put your finger to your lips when Lama Yeshe says hello to you? So later I had a chance to see him at Tushita. Just a few days later, I went into his room. Oh, Lama, I'm so sorry I did that. I just, he grabbed some almonds from the altar, thrust them into my hand, It's like, there was no need, all is forgiven, actually nothing to forgive, huge, huge heart. I mean, just unbelievable. He could be wrathful. I've seen him be wrathful with Kapan monks who are playing basketball, volleyball at the wrong time, in front of the Kapan office now. It used to be the shop also. He could be wrathful. Of course, one has to be. But oh boy, he was an extraordinary being who saved me from the cold hells of England in 1983, asked me to come back to India to help start Root Institute. Lama protected me from that, brought me back to India, where he said, I want you to, I know that you care for Indian people. I want, Indian people have been so kind. Historic Indian people have been so kind. And I want to repay the kindness of the historic Indian people, meaning the kindness of the Dharma in the first place, and then offering refuge to the Tibetans. So Lama said, I want to repay the kindness of the historic Indian people. So that's, I think, the main impetus behind all his vision for the work in India. And I guess might be, behind a lot of what His Holiness does. Of course, His Holiness is doing it for the whole world, as was Lama, of course. But at that point, Lama wanted to inspire me. So he focused on the Indian connection. And so, obviously he wanted to really offer Dharma back to Indian people who had lost it, who had basically lost it and are still a bit lost, although it's changed a lot since the 70s, since the late 70s, early 80s. And so, the next few years I put my back into trying to get land and get Root Institute started, which finally we bought land in 1987 and got started. So that was kind of Lama's vision. It was also Rinpoche's vision, but Lama was more expressive of it at that time, being kind of the main person. Rinpoche was very much kind of very deferential in a sense with Lama there, who was his guru. Yeah, so I don't know if that's beginning to answer your question. There are so many stories it would take up all the time, but that gives you some kind of taste of that great man, of that great Lama, who was so kind and powerful. He would tell us to stop being hippies and to get our act together. We've got to organize. Don't rely on some Himalayan yogi, Yogi Bear. to organize you. You know, do you want me to come into the centers, he said, and manage your centers for you? No, you got to do it yourselves. Get it together, you know, because he helped a lot in the early days. I'm told, you know, organizing things, giving people instructions and advice. But, you know, in the end, we have to do it ourselves. So, yeah, he inspired people to be practical and of course, he was the other thing I want to say, he was a great counterfoil almost to Rinpoche. It was almost like a kind of holy Laurel and Hardy. Not quite, but you know, one big like Lama. Rinpoche was thin as anything those days with huge eyes. He scared people. He scared me. It's like some alien, you know, some holy alien. Of course, he could be very humorous, Rinpoche, but kind of a lot of us were in awe of Rinpoche. But Lama was like, you know, the daddy, granddaddy, mummy, well filled out. So at the Kapan course, when it was still in the tent, I remember the 1980, which one was I on? Goodness. Anyway, 80, I think. Rinpoche would teach us on hell and suffering and death in the mornings, okay, and most of the afternoon, and not even give us proper pee-pee break sometimes, you know, would forget. There could be a bird chirping outside and Rinpoche would say, you hear that bird? Sound of suffering. And I say, oh no, we can't even enjoy a bird now. The bird is suffering, which of course birds are, I guess. But then Lama would come in the evening. He was teaching a Maitreya text at that time. A totally different energy. He would make us, you know, kind of come out of that almost depression we might have been feeling after the morning teachings on hell and death and suffering and so forth. And so they were a marvelous, you know, together.
Okay.
Real balance in all sorts of ways, teaching style, everything. Yeah. After Lama passed, then Rinpoche had to integrate, I think, both into one. He integrated some of Lama's qualities and build, as well as, you know, maintaining his own uniqueness.
Yeah.
There they are on the steps of the old Kapan Gompa, small Gompa. Now it's huge. That was the old one. Yeah.
Kabirji,
Yeah.
having devotion to the Guru and seamlessly carrying out his or her holy wish, is that a natural phenomena or should it be developed? And if it is a developed attitude, what are the steps that a practitioner should take in order to strengthen Guru devotion?
Well, this is a very excellent question and an embarrassing question for me because my Guru devotion is not nearly what it should be. When I read snippets of the excellent book on Guru devotion, you know, which was edited by Ailsa, Venerable Ailsa, then one sees how much one needs to do to actually develop authentic Guru devotion. Yeah. So I of course, one could be born with some, you know, according to Buddhists, if you had the right imprints from past lives, you could grow up and you know, automatically have so much innate, you know, Guru devotion. But for most of us, I think we have to work at it quite hard, and it's not easy because, well, we can be inspired by the Guru, like I was by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, by their example. But the point is, the power of the habitual patterns and karmic imprints in the mind is so strong that one keeps on acting in a way which is not mindful. One doesn't properly see and work on developing an understanding of the real qualities of the Guru. One you know, neglects to do the meditations properly. I mean, we're supposed to see the Guru as Buddha, right? So how do we think that is going to just arise automatically? It isn't for most people, unless you do have that strong innate feeling based on, I think, a lot of past life experience of Guru devotion. So definitely something that has to be built up step by step. I mean, it was useful for me to work in centers because often you don't want to be working where you're working and it's very difficult. So in a sense, that is a kind of devotion, just carrying on. But I think, you know, one would need to do some kind of a proper retreat also on Guru devotion to really understand what that is, what is meant by that. Because also don't forget, it has to mean also mingling one's mind with the mind of the guru, yeah, which is what the guru yoga is about. But how can you mingle one's kind of, at least relatively impure mind with the pure mind of the guru when one is caught up with all kinds of garbage conceptions, as Lama Yeshe might have said, all this inner turmoil, garbage, elaboration is, vying for space with this pure understanding of, what the guru means. So when the teachings say the guru, the ultimate guru is the bliss and emptiness of your mind, well, that sounds great, but how are you going to get to the bliss and emptiness of your mind? All of this garbage stuff going on, based on habitual patterns and self-grasping ignorance and fear, insecurity. So yeah, step-by-step process, working on oneself. That seems to be something, Lama Ursel really brought that out very well recently in a talk he gave to universal education people, that the relationship with oneself is so important, because based on that, then one can have proper understanding and relationship with others. So, devotion doesn't mean, oh, Guruji, what should I do now, based on weakness. It's got to be based on some inner strength, I think, but also a realization that here is somebody who can really, if one gets one's ego and garbage out of the way, this person can guide you, can help you, can inspire you to uncover your own inner guru, your Buddha nature. I mean, why should we see why should we be training to see the guru as Buddha? Because we all have Buddha nature, basic goodness, Buddha nature. So that is, the guru reflects that. We can see that in that person, helps us to develop confidence in our own Buddha nature. If we can get all these stray thoughts out of the way. So it all depends on so many things, doesn't it? But we have trust. We develop faith, isn't it, through also reflecting on the kindness of the guru. So I've certainly been able to a little bit understand the kindness of the guru, and continuing to do so. The kindness of this person who is guiding and inspiring through their example. That is something no one else can really offer, including one's parents, So that helps. It's step by step, definitely step by step process. Did I miss part of the question? Not sure. The second part, that was connected with the step by step, wasn't it?
Yes. What are the steps that a practitioner should follow to strengthen?
Through reflecting on their kindness, seeing how, if there is somebody who is going to guide us, who else is it going to be? If Buddha, if we believe, if we have faith that there is such a thing as Buddha, as awakened beings, how are they going to guide us in this world, What's the main way they're going to choose to guide us? It's going to be through beings like this, isn't it? Of course, it could be anyone, but it's these teachers who are manifesting these qualities. They are the ones who are going to be guiding us. That's the activity of the Buddha. That's the activity of the Buddhas in this world. Yeah? And then, of course, we see there are unbelievable qualities, When one looked at Lama Yeshe, when one looks at how Rinpoche works, and one hear what Venerable Roger has to say about Rinpoche being in close contact, it's extraordinary that a human being can be like that. And so that, I guess, can evoke the sense that, wow, how wonderful. It would be good to be like that, And so, And I think the more one is studying the texts and so forth, I think, and doing retreat, it's those people who really develop authentic, deep guru devotion, because it requires mind training. As we all know, the garbage, the clutter of thoughts, the habitual patterns of thinking, and the fear, all of those things, they just don't go away automatically. I mean, some people may need some therapy, but then there's also retreats, study, reflecting. That's the way to prise open this shell and get to something much more authentic and wise inside, isn't it? Something more compassionate. Get through this armor of the ego and the clinging to the 8 worldly feelings. Yeah. That's an important teaching, isn't it? The one on the 8 worldly feelings and how they dominate us. So if they're dominating us, there's not much room left for Guru devotion, actually. And unfortunately, these 8 are dominating most of us, most of the time. Yeah, but I've been fortunate to have met, Lama and Rinpoche in the early days, when one remembers that, and that is helpful, very helpful. But people should read Heart of the Path. Heart of the Path. Seeing the Guru as Buddha. So yeah, that's amazing. How the Guru manifests in the world. And then also reading, beginners should read the stories. They could be also very inspiring for some people, although somewhat shocking initially. Tilopa and Naropa. Naropa to some extent with Marpa, but especially Naropa's example. And then of course, Marpa and Milarepa, those stories, so amazing. I mean, all Tibetans read those stories, and that's very inspiring. Although, quite tough. It's quite tough, Tilopa asked Naropa to do some outrageous things, which I think we would have difficulty doing, And he got beaten up and smashed many times, following Tilopa's advice. But of course, Tilopa always healed him. And and of course, Milarepa, what an amazing story. Someone who actually has used his powers to kill people, and then by the end of his life, he's enlightened due to the shock treatment, but meted out by Marpa, plus Milarepa's abiding faith and devotion in Marpa. Never really gave up completely, never got angry towards Marpa, just realized he had to go through that and just carried on working and doing what. I mean, imagine being kicked out of a teaching by the Guru, beaten, kicked out and said you're unworthy. How would we react? We'd go gaga, we'd go to the police, we'd go to, some court of justice. This person kicked me and threw me out of the teaching hall. Of course, those are other different times. But this is, Milarepa went through all that. And, maybe he saw those beatings as an initiation, as a blessing. So but if your beginner is asking this question, then he has to go easy and go step by step. Look at the basic Lamrim material on Guru devotion. If the person is living in the south, he should meet some of the monks at Serajay and ask them about Guru devotion. That would be interesting. Anyway, I hope you'll be having a Serajay monk on your open heart conversation soon. That will be amazing.
Yeah.
Get them to open their hearts, on all these topics, please.
So Kabirji, Lama Yeshe asked you to come down and help set up Root Institute.
Yes.
And
Yes.
since then you have been working. I mean, that probably was the beginning, but then after that, it's a life spent in service of others. What generally is it? I mean, this is not just specifically about you, but what makes us put other people's needs in front of ours? What makes us think about other people?
Very tricky question. Has to be very honest about this question. So I've been working with FPMT since the end of the 70s. It would be interesting, I think, for people to get the background. My mother, I was at university, I met Buddhism there. My mother told me she's dying of cancer. So I was kind of numb, a little bit numb, and looking for something, although I'd already been reading some Buddhism and other religions. So I joined the Oxford Buddhist Society. We had very interesting speakers, academics as well as practitioners. Some people came down from a center in the north of England. So I decided to go up there and take a 5-day course, Lamrim course. So that totally blew my mind. And remember, I was very serious because my mother was dying and I was, impressionable age still at university and a somewhat withdrawn, inward-looking person. So I did that course. That was amazing. And so then and there, I decided to become a Buddhist, and then kept on going back to that center. And then I started living at that center, working there for them, as well as taking teachings. There are a lot of wonderful teachings going on there at the end of the 70s and the early 80s. So I took those teachings, although took a break in India as well to do the Kapan course and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's a bit of the background. And then I felt, this is where I belong. I never wanted to have some kind of regular job. I never thought of, having a career with an Oxford degree in history. Possibly one could have, joined some, the civil service, in which case I'd have committed suicide long ago, I'm sure, one way or another. But, there's service which comes from a bodhicitta motivation. Okay, that's highest, right? There's service which comes from you really are, as much as possible, putting others before you. Also initially, and here I want to be frightfully honest, there can be service that comes because you want to please people, okay? Now, pleasing people, of course, is in general a good thing, right? But if you're pleasing people because you yourself feel you're not so worthy, so therefore you want people to appreciate you and be nice to you, so let's please them. Let's work for them so that they are kind to you back. I think there's some of that dynamic going on as well, because there are some people, and I'm included, had very unsettled early lives, and that affects how you relate with others, how you relate with the world. So sometimes you want to relate with the world in a way that just makes you yourself secure. So I'm going to help others because if I help others, they will like me, and then I will, be accepted and so forth. So that's not a very strong, or I think very stable basis for offering service. So I think there was a bit of that. And in this connection, and it may help with a question that comes later, and in which case you won't have to ask that question so much. Somebody asked about worthlessness, not feeling very worthwhile, right? Feeling that...
lonely, worthless.
Yeah, there's this, why do we feel feelings of worthlessness, loneliness, or generally low about ourselves? Many reasons, obviously, yeah. Let's forget past life ones for now. Let's just, once, let me tell you a little thing. Kyabje Ling Rinpoche, great Lama, yeah, the present reincarnation of His Holiness's senior tutor. He came to Tushita to teach a few years ago. And I was amazed. He spent so much of the talk speaking about the ill effects of not receiving enough loving kindness, love, when you are young, from your parents, from, whatever, from the mother, like that. He just went on and on. I said, why is Rinpoche, this erudite great Lama, speaking so much about this? And it was obvious because, it applied to me to some extent. I'm sure it applied to many people in the hall at that time. There is an issue. If we have difficult upbringing where we do not feel cared for initially, then we have to be very careful. We have to realize that we could be at a disadvantage in terms of naturally being able to express love and compassion and offer true service, and not just be someone who is trying to make other people act nicely towards me because I feel so insecure and worthless, and I hope people love me and da-da-da-da-da. So that is the dynamic. And it can also lead to this other problem called spiritual bypassing. I don't know if you've heard of that. We've heard of all kinds of physical bypasses and heart bypass surgery, but spiritual bypassing is when you kind of use spirituality as a crutch because there's so much pain and other disturbed feelings inside. One tries to get high almost on the spiritual without working properly on those basic feelings that we have of being not good enough, worthless to some extent, a kind of emptiness. Lama had a wonderful phrase. Lama Yeshe said, a lot of us have what he called a psychological hole in the stomach. Psychological hole in the stomach. It's like that sense of emptiness. And I'm, who am I? What am I that is worthwhile? And that is well known to come from lack of proper nurture when we are young. So such people have to do a lot of, I think, more work. This is not to say that working for others cannot help that situation very much. and that we cannot do it. Of course not. Some of you may recall Rinpoche's very clear advice in his book, Door to Satisfaction, where he says, when you're thinking of yourself, how can I be happy? How can I be this? How can I be that? He says there's only confusion and anxiety and pain in the heart. And the moment you actually transfer your attention, you transfer your concern to another person, he says, even one other person, then your heart is like liberated, like somebody being liberated from chains. So that I found very useful. So it's not as though if you grow up with certain disadvantages, you can't in the moment also act in a spirit of great service. Of course you can, but it requires that leap and not, keep on going back into the past like we often do, don't we? We keep on going back and revisiting our old feelings and thoughts and just make them stronger. So we have to just stop and look, there's other people, they need help, And then the teachings on kindness, they help a lot to make the mind aware that, look, you are part of a family, like His Holiness says, human family. We're part of a world family, Others have been so kind to me, here and there, beginninglessly. If we can take that on board, then what happened to one in just this one life maybe can be put in perspective. It's not such a big deal, So that could be useful. Those teachings on the kindness of others, so useful to then build up more self-confidence and so forth. And now I've forgotten what the original question was because I digressed.
It's okay. I think, I was originally asking about what makes anybody want to put others first, and you've kind of also talked about it. And also following up with one other question about the altruistic mind. How does one develop it when we are in a world where we are taught by experiences to be so suspicious? Someone says hi, we say, oh, they said hi to us. How do we develop this mind where, like you said, mind where we accept everyone as a family, we're kind to everyone? How do we develop that when we are so unsure of people's motives, or we're obsessed about why people are?
Well, that's a good question. But don't you think, Dee, that if we use our critical thinking and use the Dharma examples, the reasonings that are there in the teachings, it's very clear how we can have a totally different perspective on others. Also, we can see, something I find useful when I remember it, that just as I am sick mentally, others are also sick. They're sick with the delusions. Of course they're going to behave like that. Of course they're going to behave with mistrust and fear and anger and jealousy and attachment, because we're full of delusions, because we haven't purified our minds. So how can I expect others to behave any differently? It's ridiculous to expect them to behave any differently unless they've engaged in mind training, So it should come as no surprise, just as, sick patients come to a doctor's waiting room. He's not surprised that it's sick, that's why he's there, because there's all these sick people. So everyone is sick, and we are sick with all kinds of things nowadays, and increasingly not believing each other because of so many reasons, because big leaders are telling us not to believe certain things, which are obviously, untrue. So, if we have a perspective and use critical thinking, we can say, wow, people are suffering so much. If they mistrust me, if they're not behaving well towards me, then how much it's due to their own mental pollution, how much they are suffering from the delusions, from the mental poisons. So then we can begin to develop some empathy and kindness towards them. Although still, of course, behaving appropriately, but our motivation becomes different, don't you think? When one sees that others are suffering, for heaven's sake. They're torturing themselves due to the delusions, torturing themselves with the way they behave, the way they talk, and the way they think, the churning thoughts. Imagine the thoughts of some of the people who behave the way they do. I mean, can you imagine what kind of thoughts some very, very important, powerful people have, which make them behave in the outrageous way they do? Can you imagine how much suffering they have in their minds? So when we think like that, I think we can develop more and more compassion, isn't it? Like a mother for a child who's very sick and delirious and saying all sorts of weird things, or like an old person who is losing it, and getting dementia and being confused. I mean, I have that example now for me with my uncle that I live with. So it's really good to see how people, to see how people suffer, people whom you've seen hale and hearty and strong and the life of the party 20, 30 years ago are now reduced to, what shall I say, confused wrecks almost. So when we see that beings are going through all this, it's very, very sad, One just feels a sadness, which is why I really connect with the teachings on sadness. I find Chogyam Trungpa has some wonderful teachings on that, the genuine heart of sadness, in his book, the Shambhala, Sacred Path of the Warrior. That's very useful to read that alongside also Lamrim and other teachings from the more Gelugpa tradition. It's useful to read other things sometimes. So this genuine heart of sadness that comes when we open our heart to the world. You're calling this an open heart conversation. It should open people's hearts to the situation we all have in this world, to the sadness, to the suffering, to the challenges we have. And, to be grateful for what we do have, of course, with the Dharma and our teachers. But tremendous sadness comes, isn't it? Seeing not only what we're doing to each other, humans, but to animals, to the planet, to the planet. What are we doing to this beautiful planet? It's just sad. But not to let the sadness get us down. Trungpa also talks about how there's a kind of dynamic between the loneliness of the person who's working on themselves and striving to be a real warrior, full of gentleness and commitment to others. And the fact that, so it's a combination of love affair, he says, and loneliness. He has the example of an island in the middle of a lake. Ferry boats keep on going to the island, coming back, but that only reinforces the sense of aloneness or loneliness of the island. But because the warrior's life, he says, is dedicated to helping others, there's that juxtaposition of loneliness and a love affair with the world. So helping the world as much as possible. So that I find very, very inspiring, the way Trungpa puts it. So we are alone, but we're alone with others in this world. And we have to, reach out as much as we can. So there are various approaches. Some will be more taken with the exchanging self and others approach in the Lamrim, others more with the Atisha, the 7 cause, 6 cause, 1 effect meditation on bodhicitta. There are wonderful teachings on that, aren't there? So great examples are given on that. Just really thinking about some of those examples is very helpful. For example, the one where it says along the lines of, imagine you're a mother whose child is drowning in a river and you are handicapped. Maybe you don't have an arm or a leg. So you just cannot help that your only precious child, from drowning. How would you feel? So then the bodhisattva, the one with great compassion, feels that way towards all beings, or wishes to be able to help all beings. But can't, because right now relatively handicapped, or rather the one who is on the verge of developing bodhicitta feels so handicapped by not having the ability to really help others. So then we strongly want to. But as you know, all of this depends on a lot of practice and keep on going and not being distracted always by the worldly affairs and the 8 worldly dharmas and all of that. So it takes some sustained practice, I'm sure, and time in retreat. So that's why Rinpoche and our organizations always emphasize retreat. And that's something I haven't been able to do for many years properly, for one excuse and another. Retreat. Retreat is where one can sustain, isn't it, the meditation and get something very strong going. Easy to talk about it. It's easy to talk about it in an eloquent way. And, people shouldn't think that I developed any of these qualities because I haven't. But the point is, if one meditates on these things, like the Lama suggests, then we could do so. Then we could develop these qualities very powerfully. And luckily, as His Holiness says, we are born also with compassion. It's natural to us. We naturally thrive on it. There is some kind of almost default position which could be said to be more oriented towards compassion than necessarily oriented towards anger, say, or so forth. So His Holiness really emphasizes that compassion isn't something totally unusual or outrageous for a human being. It's something very natural. And as we know, so many kind people, we see so many, the mothers and fathers who are looking after their children well, and so many others. They have to have some reservoir of kindness and compassion, don't they? May not be pure altruism, but tremendous sacrifice for others. I always use the example of my brother and his wife for bringing up children, especially when they were very young. The sacrifice of getting up twice or thrice at night to clean and feed the child. It's amazing. It's amazing what parents do, for a tiny, helpless human being. And here we are, adults. We get upset if people don't thank us for passing the sugar or the salt. It's ridiculous, but that's how we are. Yeah, thank goodness we have people like His Holiness and our teachers to remind us of what we can be.
In the Nat Geo documentary, The Story of God, when Morgan Freeman asked you if you were into miracles, and you responded that the real miracle is to transform the human mind. So what were you referring to there?
Well, it was a spur of the moment statement, which I knew I had some sense it would sound good and people would say, wow, what an amazing thing he said. But yeah, isn't that what the Dharma is about? Transforming the mind, not about flying in the sky, which birds can do, and Boeing 707s can do, transforming the mind on any level. Someone isn't very kind to you or isn't very nice to you, but you still maintain a serenity or maybe even have a good thought towards them. Don't you think that's transforming the mind, I mean, I think that would be amazing if one could do just that. Or if we saw somebody who was acting in a very, like the 8 verses of thought transformation, if we could practice even one part of any of those verses, seeing others as very kind, seeing them as supreme, not always wanting to have the victory, someone who harms us after we've helped them, not getting angry at them, but to see them as one's guru. All this is transforming the mind, don't you think? Totally. I mean, it's transforming it from self-cherishing to cherishing others. So all those things, transforming it from a very distracted, scattered mind into a calm, collected mind, all of these could be implied. At that moment, while we were walking on as I remember, the western side of the outer quarter of the main temple in Bodh Gaya, at that time I was just concerned about making some statement that sounded good. Although it was sincere, but I knew it would sound good. And people later said it did. But that's what Dharma is, isn't it? Transforming the mind. We're not transforming the body, although one day we will, of course, transform it into a Vajra body, Vajra holy body. But right now, we start where we are, right? So then for someone who feels worthless and helpless in this world, when they begin to reflect on precious human life, on basic goodness, Buddha nature, and begin to purify the mind, which is what's needed, right? I mean, if we're feeling a lot of low self-esteem and so on and so forth, it's not because we've been practicing too much altruism. It's because we've been practicing self-cherishing. Although people may feel sorry for us, but we've created that through ego grasping, not through being very, very kind to others. So then we purify. We have to purify. There's no other way. As Rinpoche also said, don't just think about yourself all the time. If you even think about one other person, Rinpoche says in Door to Satisfaction, the chapter on cherishing others, he says, in that instant you feel liberated from the bondage of the self-cherishing attitude. Just thinking of one other person, one animal, that frees us from this constriction, the cocoon of the habitual patterns of holding on to oneself. It's a cocoon, isn't it? That's another very great chapter in Trungpa's book, by the way, where he speaks of what he calls the cocoon, how we tie ourselves up. So you can read that, or you can read the more, of course, also more erudite, reasoning-based explanation of how we tie ourselves up with self-grasping and the delusions. Yeah. So altruism. Yeah, jolly good idea, I'd say. The only thing that will really help us, because the rest is all suffering. Self-cherishing is suffering. It brings a tiny bit of pleasure maybe sometimes in the beginning, but then it just leads to pain. So what's the point? Yeah. Yes. Also, altruism for sentient beings, feeling sorry for sentient beings who think, like I do probably most of the time, that there must be a tiny corner somewhere in samsara which is true happiness. There must be a little corner somewhere, some island or some perfect person one will meet, and then there'll be true happiness. And the teachers say, be careful with that one. All samsaric pleasures based on the confused samsaric mind, then it's not real happiness. One of Maitreya's quotes apparently is that just as excrement lacks a good taste or smell, so samsara lacks true happiness. What a powerful, what a powerful metaphor. Yeah. So if we realize that there's no happiness to be found in ordinary selfish pursuits in samsara, whatever the brochures or the advertising is saying, then one begins to develop a different attitude, perhaps, based on renunciation of one's own suffering. But there's another can I just tell you one other, since I have the captive audience, can I tell you one other definition of renunciation based on this altruism teachings? So we know the typical one that, Lama Tsongkhapa and others give, which is, renouncing the causes of suffering and not seeing even one tiny corner or one atom of samsara as happiness, all of that. Another definition of renunciation, in which fits with what you're asking about compassion and altruism, is that the warrior, the spiritual warrior, someone on, bodhisattva path, whatever, gives up anything that acts as a barrier between themselves and others. So renunciation is giving up anything that is a barrier between oneself and others. So what could be a barrier? Could be anything. Could be race, gender, of course, all based on ego, So how to remove all this armor and stuff that creates a barrier between ourselves and others? How to relate heart to heart with others? That's the question, isn't it? Very good, this title you have, Open Heart Conversations. It really, and you folks are not conversing enough. You're asking questions as though I know all the answers, which I don't. Why don't you give some of your thoughts in an open-hearted way? That would be nice. Give me time to sip some water. What do you think?
Right. Kabirji, the question that I asked you about the miracle, the real miracle, about the transformation of the human mind. Well,
yes.
Thank you for that. And also, you pretty much answered the second part of my question about how should one, someone who wants to really achieve that miracle state, start on in the path. So yes, much of it is about studying and applying the 8 verses of the thought transformation. So that was an opener.
There's nothing that those 8 verses leaves out, really. Emptiness comes in the last verse as well, isn't it? So everything. Yeah. That's the first teaching I received from Rinpoche. 8 verses in England. Started with the 8th verse, of course. But even before that, spoke about the 5 degenerations we're going through at this time, which is very interesting. Oh, the other thing I should say, it's very easy to hurt others through this lack of courage, and the other thing is sometimes we think we're being kind by just doing what other people expect of us in order to make them happy, but that's not kindness. It could actually be the opposite of kindness. Sometimes one has to behave in accord with one's principles and what might be good for the other person rather than just wanting to feel comfortable. You know what I mean? One shouldn't just give in to what people expect you to do or say, just to make them feel happy, just to make, everything cozy and comfortable. Sometimes one has to act very, very dynamically and even wrathfully or, differently. So being kind is not about making everyone just feel happy with you, because that's, again, based on that dynamic of I'm not good enough, so I'd better have other people support me. So for other people to support me, I have to be nice to them then they won't scare me by being angry with me or, not helping me. So courage, that's the other thing I must say, which I have lacked a lot and still have to work on. The courage to act in accord with principles of Dharma and not just according to worldly conventions or what other people expect of you, not just acting in a way to secure your own security, coziness. So courage. It could manifest in many ways, being straight with people, sometimes berating people, not being lazy, getting up early rather than just lounging in bed thinking, oh, I need another hour of sleep, but actually getting up and, that also requires some kind of courage, So the path requires courage. Otherwise, we just give in to our habitual patterns. That's what I found. That's my experience. So courage is something we need to work on. None of it will really work without courage. All these highfalutin other phrases, genuine heart of sadness, all that, wonderful. But if you don't have courage, you can't have a genuine heart of sadness because you're just trying to appease other people rather than helping them in a way, sometimes to help people, you have to engage in, open heart surgery. You have to, be tough with a kind heart, People need all sorts of ways of being related with, don't they? So that I wanted to say. So not idiot compassion, we're just walking around smiling and agreeing with people and becoming a carpet for people. No way. So that's something I really need to learn much more of, being more tough. Tough, kind inside. Of course, smiling occasionally, like His Holiness advises, but not smiling too much, because that can be problematic. Smiling at the right time. And Haji, I don't think we've exhausted the questions. Please, have we exhausted the question? That would be very sad.
Oh no, we have so many more questions for you.
Fatigue, one worldly belief that we've learned that makes us isolated, Why cannot the happy state that we are in continue? Are we in a happy state? Strip down basic practice. Why does love bring along hate? And why does patience bring impatience? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's different kinds of love, If it brings hate, then it's an interesting kind of love. Sorry, you're the ones asking the question.
Thank you, Kabirji. Deepthi, you're on mute. We can't hear you if you're talking.
Sorry, you can't hear me?
No, we cannot hear Deepthi. I think she was on mute. Sorry about that, Kabirji.
Deepthi, sorry, come back.
It's okay. I've experienced this this topic. I thought something was wrong with me because some time ago I felt like, let's just close this, take a break, working let's take a break because, trying to help others, being in service of others is definitely exhausting. And then I found this article, which I'm trying to share, which said that, well, there is something called compassion fatigue. I don't know if you are able to see this. If you're, I went from having, thank you. I went from taking care of somebody who was very ill to being in a place where there was a lot of demand for my time and I had to give. And I said, okay, this is a complete burnout. I don't want to do anything connected to people anymore. And then I found that this article, and this was written for a magazine where they talked about fathers going through. This article is from there, fathers going through this. But we've seen this among people who are in the service sectors, people who are, nurses, police people, people who are doctors, mental health individuals, and definitely people who work in centers or volunteer, and definitely people who are in Dharma. So what are your views on this, Kabirji?
Well, yes, it's there. It's very much there. And I think that's why they keep on saying, the lamas and the teachings, that if we don't have wisdom, then the compassion can't function, because there's going to be a lot of self with the compassion, and expectation and hope and desire, to be thanked and not wanting to be blamed for anything. That's such a great slogan, yeah. One of the thought transformation slogans, one of the shortest ones and most powerful ones and difficult ones. Don't expect thanks. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that almost dreadful? Don't expect thanks. Again, why? Because people are sick, right? Mentally sick. They're not thinking of you, they're thinking of themselves, like most of us are. So why are they going to thank you? They won't even see your kindness sometimes because they're so caught up in their own drama. Yeah. So we expect thanks, and it's not totally wrong, but it creates problems, doesn't it? You feel unwanted. People have done so much for you, you sick person, and you're not even acknowledging, and you're just carrying on. And then we have expectations. We have not enough skill. Often, as we know, in the caring industry or in the caring profession, there's not enough people there. So people are stretched beyond their limits. I know that's certainly the case with so many doctors in India. Too much to do. I mean, incredible what they do without going gaga. The few times I've been in, say, government hospitals, so much to be done. And these poor doctors and nurses running around. So of course, you're going to get physically tired. You're going to, if you don't have, again, mind training, then it's impossible to maintain that kind of energy of kindness and compassion, unless you're a very unusual person who are naturally very gifted or whatever. It's just too much. So one has to, also, of course, always recollect Shanti Deva. You do what you can. If you can't do it, don't worry. For now, we can't do everything, but we do what we can with a good heart. Easy to say, but of course we do have expectations. I would like this person to get better under my care, or et cetera, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And other people are often not just, are stubborn. If you're working with old people, they can be stubborn because they're unhappy and frustrated, Imagine to be old. You can't do what you did when you were young, and people are trying to help you, but it's like just increases your sense of helplessness. So that person is going to be upset often and angry. And then you say, oh no, I'm trying to help them, and they're just getting angry with me. And you develop compassion fatigue. So yes, it requires a lot of skill and perspective. I would so much it must involve skill, perspective, no expectations, and just trust in, having a good heart, and trust that just having a good aspiration and a good intention does help. If nothing else, it helps one's own practice and oneself to be a better practitioner and human being, and therefore one will be of more benefit to others at some point, even if one can't do what one wants now. One feels like that mother, the handicapped mother next to the river, where the child is drowning. Imagine if she just gave up and compassion fatigue. I can't. No, she keeps on going. So one needs all sorts of strategies to go beyond that. But the main thing is emptiness, isn't it? There's no real me trying to help a real patient who is a real pain in the neck, and et cetera, there's a kind of more a flow. But one has to be careful, because there can be genuine physical fatigue. And as we know, when we are physically fatigued, it can lead to many other problems. We need to be kind to ourselves. Maybe it's also connected with how kind we are to ourselves. Maybe we're not kind enough sometimes. And the Mahayana teachings can sometimes disguise the fact that Buddha gave many teachings, and some also say you have to be very kind to yourself. Lama Yeshe used to say, if you're not gentle with yourself, how can you be gentle with others? Lama Yeshe used to say. True, I think. How can we be rough and tough with ourselves? Okay, self-cherishing thought's one thing, but if we're not very skillful, we can feel that we are punishing ourselves, in toto. And that's not good. We need to take care. Of course, we may feel guilty, we may feel bad because all the bad things one did, but then one has to go beyond that. purify, but also then don't feel bad about yourself, especially if you have to help others. You have to feel good and strong.
Mhm.
Lama told one teacher at the institute in England where I was, he said, I don't care what you feel like in the morning, depressed or whatever. If you're teaching people, and there were weekend teachings would happen regularly with this particular monk, he said, you get out there and you teach and you smile, and there should be no hint of what you're going through, in that sense. So you just get out there and help others, Don't wallow in your own self-pity mind and oh this, oh that. You get out there, you smile and you teach, that kind of thing. So anyway, that's connected. It's not exactly connected to compassion fatigue, but it's also the story Jet Sunma gave once. I remember she's maybe given it several times. This practitioner who had lost his father, I think in Tashijong, a practitioner somewhere had lost his father and was very upset and da 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 da. And then one day the practitioner said to himself, "What's going on? I'm just wasting my time with these feelings and regret. I'm going to stop this right now." And he just stopped feeling that way. Stop getting caught up in all that, grieving for his father and being upset and morose. He said, what is this? It's not helping me. It's not helping others. He just stopped. I love that story. Jitsunma. She has some good stories.
But Kabir ji,
Jay.
Even for something like that to happen, where one day you come to a place where you say, oh, now I'm going to stop. It takes a lot of mental practice to have it's not as easy like going and switching something on or switching something off. So that takes a lot of practice, wouldn't you say?
I'm sure. But my dad, who used to smoke 50 or so cigarettes a day, he just gave up one day.
Oh.
Difficult. They had a lot of suffering, blood coming out of orifices, pain, but he just gave up, So if one can he wasn't a Dharma practitioner as such, if he could give up, this is well before we met the Lama and all. If he could give up, hold on, when was this? Yeah, he maybe took up smoke. He'd given up smoking largely, but then he came back to it. But he gave it up for a while, and it was very painful, but he carried on with that regime. So, we can do things sometimes. We're tough enough, strong enough, committed enough. The other thing, in case you don't ask, you were saying I was involved with all the centers and da-da-da. I found that, sometimes one outlives one's usefulness, like something expires. I think I reached my expiry date some time back for quite a lot of the work I'm doing. I would rather just, connect and work with education with children. This may be my lazy mind, but it's also, I would like to be in nature and in a rural place and just working with children and maybe with some, plants and agriculture and stuff. But here I am in some kind of administrative position with 6 centers. Look what I got caught up with due to karma or whatever, or trying to please the guru. Rinpoche put me on all these boards for a reason. And in one sense, I'm ashamed because he obviously wanted me to become an outer professional as well as an inner professional, as you know. But I find with the outer professionality, it's just getting, worse and worse. That's the honest truth. So rather than becoming a better administrator, one is becoming a worse administrator. What could be more terrible than that, So one advice I'd give, which is a question which comes to volunteers and people, don't queue up and agree to be on the board of 6 centers or help a lot of people unless you really are Superman or Superwoman or a Super Bodhisattva type, very skillful. Some people can do it. Be very careful what you take on, because Rinpoche is just no less than Tilopa or Mela or Marpa. He won't beat you probably or throw you off buildings or tell you to go and snatch a bride from a wedding party like Tilopa told Naropa, but he will put you in situations which make you cringe, and which makes your ego very uncomfortable. which is, they say, one of the duties of a guru, to insult your ego. So yeah, if you can accept that the guru is there to insult your ego, then one might be able to develop some genuine devotion and not just rant and rail against slings and arrows of unruly fate or whatever. So yeah, I feel one wants to retire from the administrative things and take up more one-on-one and working with young adults and children and learning more about how to help young people. I think young people need so much help now in this technological society with a world that is going berserk, really berserk. The people, the societies, the elements, so much, as His Holiness is saying. Emotional hygiene, proper learning, and which Lama was talking about years ago. He was such a visionary, Lama Yeshe. He was talking about this in 1980, universal education and so forth. That's anyway. So just to say that I've been helping with centers, but as as you get closer and closer to your expiry date, just like food, better not to not to eat it. Better to throw it away. So people like me need to be consigned to some kind of dustbin, but a dustbin where one can still help others in some way. This is my feeling.
So definitely, I hope that you get to do the retreats that you want to do.
At some point, I hope there will be time to do some practice with Rinpoche.
Like for a person who is so busy with 6 centers and
a daily practice can often look like a mess. Especially sometimes when one is very rushed and gotten up early enough. So then one has to be very careful to keep one's daily commitments is an uphill task, and that's of course one's treading on dangerous ground here. So again, my advice to beginners: don't take on too much work in the beginning unless you're really a super person. And don't take on too many teachings or teachings with commitments to do, unless you're really incredibly disciplined and very, very clear-headed somehow, and very, very, very devoted from the beginning. It's quite hard to keep up if you've taken on too many teachings. My first ever interview, my first ever time with His Holiness, he brought this out actually. I was very young, and how old was I? 24, 25. I met His Holiness in Dharamsala when His Holiness wasn't so busy those days, and he knew what I was going, and he brought out this whole element of what are you studying and what teachings have you taken, what initiations have you taken, and he expressed kind of surprise and concern at how much I'd taken on. So one has to be very careful, go step by step. Work a lot on the basics and developing a steady, calm mind. As Atisha, the great Atisha says, he says, if you try and help others or benefit others or teach others before you've achieved stability in your own mind, he says, don't do that. First achieve stability, then help others. But in this age of degeneration, a lot of people like me are out there helping or pretending to help others, teaching. And could be, one has to be very careful, very careful. I'm not saying I haven't benefited people, but, one has to really get one's own act together. And that only comes about through proper retreat, unless you're already somehow quite advanced. Of course, daily life is the practice also for me. If I didn't have some patience, quite a lot of patience, I would have gone gaga trying to help the projects in Bodh Gaya and elsewhere. I would have just gone completely crazy if I hadn't developed some patience, some perseverance. And also now, it requires perseverance, patience. There's a lot to be done. As you know, government has more and more compliances that they thrust on us and this and that. And when you're helping in different areas, it can be a lot. That's why I have a stiff neck, perhaps.
Yeah.
Delusion and karma plus government compliances lead to a stiff neck. Yeah, that's the formula.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Sorry,
It's my
Deepak.
pleasure. I hope some of it can be useful for people who watch.
No.
What isn't useful, as His Holiness says, just forget it, Take it as the rantings of an unstable mind. But if anything has been useful, then good.
Thank you so much. And we really hope that you can do that retreat very soon.
Yeah, maybe sometime. But I'll probably try and find ways of getting out of it first. But one needs to do some retreat. But not before the end of March, that's for sure, because all this government work has to be done by then. And various projects have to be got off the ground again. And as you know, there are many challenges with the projects in India, with some of them. So we have to try and get things back on track. Big responsibility.
Thank
And
you so much.
Thank you for...
Thank you, Kabirji, for your valuable time today. And once we get past the COVID times and Choe Khor Sum Ling, Bengaluru reopens, we really, really look forward to inviting you and hosting your precious teachings at our center, Kabirji.
We could have an open heart conversation. That would be good.
Absolutely.
The monks are there for the teachings. The monks are excellent. They are people who have sacrificed a lot of their life to studying in the monasteries, and they have great erudition and practice. They should be invited to teach. Of course, one can do some basic things, but I think discussions are good. Workshop is good, So thank you all what you're doing for CKSL. I think Rinpoche is very happy with CKSL, so that's really great.